buds, let's think about how that translates into XR. So again, motion sickness, again, is a big thing that you're going to have to think about. So the questions that we ask here for translating to XR are, how would we translate this? How would we translate what we've learned here into XR? And I've been talking about it most of the time here. But how would we make this an XR game? Or should we make it an XR game? We should always ask, should we, when we're doing things. Would it benefit from being in XR? Would it make it an excellent experience in XR? Or are we doing it just because it's cool and just because it's the trend for everything to be in XR now? We always want to ask the why. Should we do this? But platformers are a thing in VR, they are a thing in XR, and they can work, and so we just have to think about certain things. We have to think about motion sickness, make sure that, I can't spell, camera control should always be in the hands of player. Don't move things for them. And follow motion sickness best practices you want to think about. Okay. You also want to think about, and we'll see this when we play. So there are platformer games that you can play that are first person. So you want to think about whether you want first person or a third person platformers in VR, in XR. Because if it's first person, you have a much greater risk of motion sickness. So you have to mitigate that. So you have to add a lot more mitigations. And if it's third person, it's not as big a deal, and we'll see. There are some various games that we're going to play. There are some platformer games that I looked up to see can we stream those, but looking at them, I saw, even though it was a third-person platformer in VR, which is, for me, that's more playable to me than a first-person platformer. Because again, if I'm going to get sick on a platformer in 2D, I'm absolutely going to get sick on a platformer in VR. So there are versions of third-person platformers out there that I was looking into but decided that I would not play because I could not play them without getting sick. Because even though they were in third person, they acted like the third person 3D platformers on 2D, in that the camera moved with the character. In XR, you don't want the camera to move with the character unless it's first person. Even then, you want the player to control the action, the motion. So let's see, let's write that down. So what do because I said a lot there. Consider whether you want third-person platformers or first-person platformers. If it's first-person, it's going to be a much greater risk of motion sickness. You're going to have a lot more mitigations. If it's third-person, don't attach camera to player, to character. Don't attach the camera to the player. Character. Because if you do that, you're going to have to add a lot more mitigations. if it's detached from the player, if it's detached from the character, you can keep the environment stable and steady, like they were doing here with Trine. They didn't move the camera anywhere near as much in this game. And I think part of that was just because their way of designing the environment was completely different. Because they're not designing a 3D environment, they're designing a 2D environment, and there's a limit to the height of that 2D environment. So it can't go higher unless there's something higher to go to. So that was probably part of it. There was a limited amount of motion because there wasn't enough environment to move. But you can keep the player stable with less motion, less forced motion. And that is a much better for motion sickness. Than the other options. And hopefully we'll see that. Hopefully I picked the right games. I haven't played them before. I had to get some free demos because, again, I couldn't get Moss to work from the Quest to here or from the PlayStation to here. I already have 2 versions of it, and since they don't support cross-buy, I already have 2 versions of the game. I don't want to have to buy a 3rd version. So we're just not going to play Moss, even though it's the best one I could find. And since I can't, unless if you know how I can technically figure out how to get the sound and the video from my PlayStation to the stream so that it's easy, I'm gonna have to completely figure out another way of streaming for the place. Yes, you can, and I know it's possible, but do I have the equipment to do it? That's the question. I have to figure that out. Because if it costs money, it's not gonna happen. So I won't be playing Moss or any of my PlayStation games, and possibly not any of my Quest games, which limits the number of things that I can play as examples for y'all to learn from. I can record from them fine, but I can't play them streaming right now. I will work on it and try to figure it out. If you have suggestions, if you know if you know what I need, I can at least make a list of things that I need for the future, but I'm not going to be able to get them right now. Like, there are some microphones that I can get to hook up to the Quest to pick up the sound on the Quest to stream, but those cost money, so that's not going to happen right now. And so forth. Same thing probably with the Sony, with the PlayStation. But there is a way to stream directly from the PlayStation, so I also just need to look into that. How can I do that? It may be a little bit more cumbersome to do, to switch between the two to stream. But I have to, if I can do that seamlessly without having to stop and restart the stream, then I'll do that. But I have to figure it out. If you know how, let me know. So anyway, translating to XR. Anything else that we need to, that is the biggest thing, is the motion sickness, honestly, for the platformer. And then the other things are the best practices on, and I'll share those, is all of the best practices. These are best practices for gaming and for VR. So add the option for the manual progression. So default to manual progression, and then give the option in context to auto. And that would be the same for either. Subtitles always, so default the subtitles on, but always accompany voiceover with text in VR. They can choose to turn it off if they want, give them the option to do that. But for default it on. And that is the best practice for VR, especially because, again, they could still be getting situated in the headset. That something could happen outside of the headset, especially in a classroom setting or a training setting. Somebody could be talking to them outside of the headset, and if they can't pause, or if they can't, I mean, that's another option. Give them the option to pause. That could be like, let's see. But they can't rewind, so I mean, it's not gonna completely show. That's not gonna completely solve the problem. You can give them the option to pause if they need to leave the game, just because external distractions happen. That, or stop and come back. Pick back up where they left off. This is especially for VR. And I think I talk about that in external distractions, so I'm going to add that to the list. This might be the same list from last week, for the most part, except for the Animal Mod book. We'll see. Oh, and Baobab Studios for, here, I'll write it down here. Look at how Baobab Studios handles cinematic experiences. Their motion, how they mitigate motion sickness. For cutscenes, derive some best practices from that. That's why we study these things, is derive the best practices from it. See what's working, see what's not working. If you're prone to motion sickness, get a friend who's prone to motion sickness and get them to tell you what's working, what's not working. And that's not exactly something that you can screen for in, I mean, maybe you can, but I don't know if that's like an invasion of privacy, ethics, all that. When you're doing your usability testing on any experience, you want to have a large demographic of people of all kinds, new to gaming, non-game, including gamers, because again, gaming has direct influence on VR, and how people have certain mental models that come from the gaming community that they transfer over into VR, and they expect the same or similar behaviors in VR. And so you want people who haven't gamed, people who have gamed, different levels of gaming, heavy gaming, casual gaming, occasional, and so forth. You want that demographic, and you want demographics, male and female, various ages, in there as well. You want a larger, it's a different this surprising demographic, even if you're not creating a game, you still want that demographic in there, because their expectations are different. And regardless of what industry you're working for or what industry you're creating an experience for, there are people in those industries who game at home, and they're going to have those expectations. So you want them in your demographic when you do your research. So study how Baobab handles that, and I will again add all of these articles about memory cues and tooltips and NPC behaviors and so forth into there as well. And that is all I can think of. If this stream is helpful to you, if you find it helpful, you can support me by liking, following, subscribing, sharing, telling your friends about it. And next week we are going to do a retro style 2D platformer. So I hope you look forward to that. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.